Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are at Numbers chapter 33. Now, Numbers chapter 33 is a relatively long chapter, but it contains really a documentation of well, it says here, the journeys of the children of Israel. And by journeys, it means, well, the Hebrew word is actually quite interesting. It means the pulling out, pulling up tent pegs. As you know, they were journeying and they are nomadic people at this point in time, and they lived in tents. And each time they move from a location, the word that's translated uh, as journey here is really the word masa. And it really depicts a very vivid imagery of packing up and pulling out the stakes. And they went on their journey. So that's how it is depicted. And this particular chapter resonates all the major event points from the time they left Egypt. So they went out of the land of Egypt by their armies, and we were told in Exodus chapter 12 and 13 that they were numbering the Israelites of 20 years and above, and they were called the armies uh, of the Israelites. And as they left, they were also called the servants of God, of Jehovah Tzevaot, under the command of God, leaving Egypt uh, under the hand of Moses and Aaron. This is literally under the hand, meaning Moses and Aaron were given the authority, but they were really armies of God. Now, Moses wrote down the starting points of the journey at the command of God. When it says the starting points of their journeys, um, it literally means these are the how should we say, um, the word here is the point of starting, the point of going forth. So the translation is actually not too bad. The beginning points of their journeys at the mouth of the Lord. So the word here really talks about the mouth of God, even though it's translated as command. This is as God spoke to Moses. And these are the journeys according to their starting points, right? These are the beginning of their journey. So, what is trying to say that at every juncture of their journey, these are the markers, and that is the major points of the starting blocks of every segment that is being recorded here. Now, they began right here. They departed from Ramesses in the first month. No, remember, this is the first month of Aviv, all right? And or we call it Nisan. This would be found in Exodus chapter 12. And we are told that they left on the 15th day of the first month, the day after the Passover of the children of Israel went out with boldness in the sight of all Egyptians. So, in terms of its dates, it recognizes the fact it started on the 15th day, the day after the Passover. And we read in Exodus 12, the day after the Passover. The Passover is the 14th of Nisan. The next day is the 15th of Nisan. So that's what we are seeing. So on the beginning of the 5th day of Nisan, they ate the lamb or the goat, enough for the families and the neighbors together. And you read that in the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. Then we're told, for the Egyptians were burying their firstborn, whom the Lord had killed among them, also on their gods. The Lord had executed judgments. Now, this is a highlight that we should just pay attention to. Firstborns died. So the 10th plague were about the firstborn, and we're talking about the firstborn son, right? But both man and animal, man and beast, all had to die. Now, while they were burying the miracles of God, are also called the judgments of God. The 10 plagues are a judgment on the gods of Egypt. And so while we read about the 10 plagues, this will give us a good clue what we will be reading and how God is attacking and passing judgment on each of the gods of Egypt. The narrative speaks of the children of Israel moving from Ramesses and camped at Sukkot, and they departed from Sukkot and went to Etam. Verse 6 is Etam, which is on the edge of the wilderness. I'm of the opinion that this would be the wilderness of Sinai, and they have come to the edge of the Sinai. And then from Etam, they turned back to Pi Hahiroth. This Pi Hahiroth would be apparently a watchtower of some sort, which is at the east of Baal Zephon, and it encamped near Migdol. So they departed from before Hahiroth, passed through the middle of the sea, and this would be the crossing of the sea, and then into the wilderness, and this would be the wilderness of Arabia. And so where did they cross the Red Sea would be the Gulf of Aqaba. This would be my estimation of what is happening. After they crossed to the other side to Arabia, they went on a 3-day journey in the wilderness of Etam, camped at Marah, where the water was bitter. And we have read that. You probably read that in Exodus chapter 16 and 17. They moved from Marah and came to Elim, remembering at Elim, you find the 70 palm trees. There will be the 12 springs of water and the 70 palm trees, and they camped there. So we would call this very much an oasis. And from Elim, they went back by the Red Sea, and it's on the other side of the Red Sea, not the Sinai side, but the Arabian side. And they moved from the Red Sea and came to the wilderness of Sin. Now, this would be the wilderness of Sin, journeyed from the wilderness of Sin, went to Dophkah, and from Dophkah, they camped at Alush, and from Alush, they camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. Rephidim would also be the place where water came out of the rock, right? Water out of rock. And in Rephidim, they also had the unfortunate engagement with the Amalekites. And from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Now, the wilderness of Sinai would be a place where they would stay for quite a while. This is the receiving of the Torah. And a lot would have been said from chapters 19 onwards. Now, after the year was over, they went from Mount Sinai and camped at, this would be verse 16. This would be Kifrot Hatta Ava. And then from there, they moved to Hatzerot. And so all of these are just names. I'm just going to go through them. And these are many of the slides we never really read much because from the book of Numbers, we actually read from the second year where they are. And once they completed the second year, it went on to the 39th and 40th year as well. And so a lot of places in between are not recorded, but we find them here. They departed from Hatzerah to Rithmah, to Rimon Peretz, and to Livnah, and to Risa, and then to Kehelatat, and then to Mount Shepher, and to Haradah. Verse 25, from Haradah, they went to Machelot, right? Machelot. And then from Machelot, they camped at Tahat. And then from Tahat, they camped at Tarak. From Tarak, they camped at Mitka. From Mitka to a place named Hashmonah. This is Hashmonah, and then they came to Moserot, and then now to Bnei Ya'akan, right? Bnei Ya'akan. From Bnei Ya'akan, they came to Hor Hagidgat. These are all names that we would not have gone through, but they are nevertheless recorded here to leave us with where they have been going. And then they went to Yot Vatah. And then they came to Afronah. From Afronah, they came to Etzion, Gaver. And then they moved to the wilderness of Zin. Now this is different. This is Zin. Just now was Sin. This is Zin, which is very different. Sometimes the names sound quite familiar. Then they went to Kadesh, and from Kadesh they came at Mount Hor on the boundary of the land of Edom. Now, sometime, how should we say? Sometime in verse 18, I think I've passed that. Now, let me just point back to you. In verse 18, this part here, because it just went by, the reason why this Ritmat is important was that's the place where they refused to enter the promised land. And so from there on, we had a lot of other locations. This would be in Numbers chapter 13. Now, when they are at the boundary of the land of Edom, we are told in verse 38 about Aaron. The whole story has gone on very quickly. Aaron the Kohen went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord, and he died there in the 40th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt on the first of the 5th month. And Aaron was 100 and 23 years old when he died on Mount Hor. So we are told that the major anchor from verse 38 at Mount Hor would be the 40th year. So they have traveled 39 years so far, right? This is important for us to recognize. And from verse 38 onwards, it begins a brand new final year discussion. Now, in verse 40, we read of King of Arad, the Canaanite, who dwelt in the south, in the land of Canaan, heard the coming of the children of Israel. So they departed from Mount Hor and camped at, this would be Zalmonah. And they departed from Zalmonah and came to Punon. And from Punon, they went to Ovot. And from Ovot, they came to a place called Iyer Ha'avarim. This would be this word here. This word is really Iyer Ha'avarim. And it camped there. This is Iyer Ha'avarim at the border of Moab. Right? We'll touch on all these. And then they departed from Iyim. Iyim is the same name of Iyer Ha'avarim. And then they moved and camped at Divon Gad. And they moved from Divon Gad to a place called Almon Diflat Taimah. Almon Diflat Taimah, although it's time, it's Taimah. And from this place, they went to the mountains of Avarim before Nevo. Now, Nevo is really, we don't know where it is, but it is a place where Moses died. And they departed from the mountains of Avarim, camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan, across from Jericho. And so they stayed in the plains of Moab. Now, what is important is that they have crossed from Edom, and then they came to Moab. Understand that Edom, God had given the land to the descendants of Esau. Moab, God has given the land to the descendants of Lot. And further up, you also get the land of Ammon, which is what God had given to the descendants of Lot as well. We come to verse 50. Now, verse 50 says this, that the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan. This whole story is very much recorded in the book of Deuteronomy. And there was a long number of months. The whole book of Deuteronomy was a review, right? Was a review. And so the book of Numbers at this point in time, in chapter 33, was a recap of what has happened. And it says, speak to the children of Israel, say to them, when you have crossed the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, destroy all their engraved stones, destroy all their molded images, demolish all their high places. And you shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. This one we'll spend a bit of time trying to unravel it. In verse 52, this idea of drive out. Drive out means to cause to occupy. But if you cause to occupy, whoever the inhabitants of the land were there, they have to be driven out. So the word actually means to inherit, to possess, and also to dispossess. possess the others. That's the really interesting part of such Hebrew words. And they are to drive them out, to occupy the land, to disengage all of them from before you. And it says here, to destroy. Now, the word to destroy here uh, means to blot out. Now, these are very strong words which we seldom pay attention to. The Israelites are to completely remove. Remove what? This would be engraved stones. I think the easier way to understand this would be the idols. They are to blot out all the idols so that no Israelites will ever remember that they existed. And then all their molded images are the kinds of idols, right? These are carved. These are metallic. And then the word destroy here again is also to make perish. And the final word of destroy, demolish, is to annihilate all their high places. The high places are called bamotam. Bamotam is from the word bamoth. It's in the hills, and they have altars, right? All their altars. And so what does God actually mean is this. They are to drive out those who are living there, but more importantly is to blot out all the stones of called their gods, blot out all their molded or metallic images, annihilate all their altars at the high places. In verse 52, it is not only by chasing them out of the land, but the more important thing is that those icons that could distract the Israelites, they are told to completely clear out, completely blot out, so that nobody will ever remember any of these idol places and idol materials that is in the land. God is very clear that they are to clear out all these so that the Israelites will not be tempted to go away from God and worship idols. Verse 53. 53 says, you shall dispossess, drive out, same word, the land, and then dwell in it. They are to stay in it now, for I have given you the land to possess. To possess here would be to take possession. To take ownership, to inherit. And so this is the land that God swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it is not tied in a bow handed over to them. They are instructed when you go in, you must do all these things so that you do not remember of any idolatry in the land. And the people needs to be chased out so that you can take over their place. This is how God gave the land to Edom, to Moab, and to Ammon. That they too have to go in and dispossess it from the original occupants. Now they are told to divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. Now, in this case, you find that they are to do it by lots. And they were picked by lots, but there is a principle that God had given. If they are larger in their tribe, they should be given a larger inheritance, a piece of land. The inheritance is actually a piece of land. And then if they were smaller, they shall be given a smaller piece of land. And there everyone's land shall be whatever was given by lot. And by doing lot, they believe that God has a hidden hand behind to decide for them who to get what. And so you shall possess according to the tribes of your fathers. And tribes is very important. The word tribes in verse 54 really means the staff or the branch. So these are the branches, and each branch shall have their own land. And we notice as well in Numbers chapter 1 onwards that it is the sons who are counted as tribes of your fathers. In verse 55, there is a consequence if they do not drive the people out of the land. So the word in verse 55 means if you do not drive out, if you do not dispossess, if you do not, how else can we say this? Destroy, right? We can use the word destroy. If you do not destroy these people, the inhabitants, those who are staying there of the land from before you. The word before you would be, before you are there now, right? Before you now. This is from your face. You can see them, but if you don't remove them, then you will have a consequence, and it shall be that those whom you let remain. The word let remain literally means you, well, I guess you could say you can leave over, that you, it is the remnants, right? These are the ones that remain. These are the ones who are still alive, right? Still alive. They are still there. These are the, what we call the the local people who were still there at that point in time. If they have not been chased out and they're still alive, God says that they will be irritants to your eye and thorns on your side, and they shall harass you in the land wherever you dwell. So what does this mean? Irritants in your eye. Irritants in your eye means they are going to be the thorns. That irritants means the thorns. Thorns in your eyes. This is actually a very similar word in Chinese, right? Which they call 眼中钉, right? The thorns in your eyes. The second word here is not thorns, but it is a similar word as thorns. These are what we call, well, barbs or things that prick. Yes, you can also call it thorns, another word for thorns as well. And thorns in your side. Now, the word side here would be, how should we say? The word side would be the part where it's on the side. We've got two sides, for example, here. And so sides would really mean the two sides here, 1 and 2. These are the sides. And so people in those days would lie and sleep on their sides. And if there is a thorn or something that's pricking the side, you cannot sleep peacefully, right? You cannot sleep peacefully. And this really gives us, how should we say it? It's well, I suppose you can call it an idiom. It's a saying that these will be enemies forever disturbing you. And so the word harass you really mean to cause distress. in the land where you live. So, what God is saying is a very simple principle. If you do not remove the grass with the roots, then the grass will grow again and become a pain in your side, a thorn in your eye, and they will give you a lot of anxiety, distress. What else did the Bible say? It will give you a lot of reason to be anxious. They'll make you suffer, basically. Now, what has happened later on when we read in the book of Judges, in the book of First Samuel, Second Samuel, you get the Amalekites, you get the Philistines. All of these continually became a pain in the side. Now, our last verse here is a conclusion. The conclusion is this, and this shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them. What do you mean? To do to you, uh, and this is what we call as I thought to do, is liken, right? Liken, it will resemble, um, it will uh, resemble what God had wanted to do to these people that you're supposed to remove them. These are the inhabitants. And so for God to give them the land, they are to gain it themselves, have faith in God, trust God to win the wars before them and follow what God has said. And then there will be peace. But God has said, if you don't, then they will forever come as a pain in your side, poking your side. You will not have any peaceful time to sleep. And they will cause you a lot of distress and anguish. And they are called the thorn in your eyes. And God says, what I wanted to do to these people, you know what? I would be doing to you too. That God will judge Israel if they don't do as God says. And so they will forever not have peace unless they do what God says. Now we have covered 56 verses today very quickly, but basically to give us a feel of what they have done all these years. And what we have read is really an account of 40 years. And when we get to the book of Deuteronomy, that's the last few months of that 40 years. And at the end of that 40 years, we also see that Moses died. At the beginning of that 40 years, Aaron died. And so that would be very symbolic. These are milestones in the wanderings of the Israelites. At the 40th year is perhaps the most memorable year, and it is also the time that God will leave with them his instructions on how to inherit the land. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.